All right, I'm reading this out loud because it's the entire segment. David French, New York Times opinion. Headline, America's Misery Amid Wealth. And the pull quote is, we have more money, more stuff, and more loneliness than any generation in American history. The abundance did not save us.
That's not an op-ed. That's a graduation card from a youth pastor who just discovered GDP charts.
Yeah, but wait. Let me give you the full quote, because it's the springboard. By every economic measure, Americans are better off than their parents. Yet, by every measure of despair, suicide, overdose, loneliness, they are worse. We are a rich nation starving for meaning.
See, this is how they get you. Every economic measure is doing a lot of work there. Median household income is up, but so is the cost of not going bankrupt from a root canal.
Right. And Andrew Gelman's response basically says exactly that. He wrote a whole thing, I've got it pulled up, called The Misery Isn't About Wealth, It's About Distribution.
I love it when statisticians get catty with op-eds. What did he say?
He said French is committing the ecological fallacy. National averages don't describe individual experience. The S&P crossed 6,000, but the median American has less than $3,000 in savings. Two different universes.
So the headline should be, America is miserable amid some people's wealth, which is not a philosophy problem, it's a tax code problem.
But French would say even high-income people report loneliness and anxiety. It's not strictly about money. The top quintile has higher suicide rates than the bottom in some studies.
Maybe because the top quintile is also drowning in status anxiety and private school admissions, but that's still not the same as I have to choose between insulin and rent.
That's what Gelman points out. The misery is concentrated among people without college degrees, in rural areas, with disabilities. The white working class, as the sociologists say, has been dying of despair. That's not an existential crisis, that's deindustrialization and OxyContin.
Right. And if your solution is find meaning, you're telling someone in a food desert to pray away that the mill closed, the hospital moved, and the VFW burned down.
French would say community can be rebuilt. Bowling leagues, churches, volunteer fire departments. He's not just saying pray, he's saying join something.
But the reason those institutions collapsed is because the economic base collapsed. You can't have a bowling league if everyone works 60 hours at a Dollar General and an Amazon warehouse just to make rent.
Okay, but we've seen community organizations work even in poor areas. Mutual aid groups, union halls, churches with food pantries. That's not nothing.
Agreed. But that's not find meaning. That's material support. The meaning comes after the rent is paid. Gelman's whole point is that French inverted the causal arrow.
He did say that. He said French treats meaning as the independent variable and misery as dependent, but the data suggests economic security is upstream of both.
So the real spiritual crisis is that we've made it illegal to be economically secure. But that doesn't get you a Times op-ed. That gets you a Bernie Sanders speech from 2016.
I mean, we did an entire episode on wealth without work, and this is the same core argument with more Psalm 23.
Right, the one where we concluded the only growth industry left is gambling. And now we have egg prices at $8. The vibes are not vibing.
But here's where I think French is onto something, even if his data is sloppy. Even after you control for income, Americans report being more isolated than people in poorer countries. That's weird. We have more stuff and fewer friends.
That's because we built an economy that treats relationships as a luxury good. You have to pay for childcare, pay for a car to see your friends, pay for a third place that isn't a Starbucks. Meanwhile, the algorithm sells you a parasocial relationship with a podcast.
So it's not abundance that made us miserable. It's that we commodified the things that used to be free.
Exactly. And David French can't say that because then he'd have to admit the market is the problem, not the solution.
Gelman's data does show that countries with stronger social safety nets, Denmark, Norway, don't have the same despair gap, and they're equally rich.
So the headline is, America is miserable amid wealth because the wealth is hoarded by a few, and the rest of us are on a subscription model for basic human contact.
That's a much better headline. Maybe we should start an op-ed section.
We'd get accused of class warfare, which is just a fancy way of saying math.
So we just said class warfare is fancy math. And it reminded me there's a statistics professor named Andrew Gelman who basically formalized 4 mechanisms that explain why people are miserable even when the aggregate numbers go up. You want the SAD distribution?
Oh, absolutely. Please, give me the sadness equations. I need the coefficients on my despair.
Okay, first one. People react to change, not level. You don't feel your salary. You feel the raise or the cut. If your income holds steady at 80 grand for 5 years, your brain treats that as stagnation, even if 80 is objectively fine. It's the first derivative of the utility function. We're wired for delta, not state.
So it's a thermostat that only screams when the temperature changes. The house could be on fire, but if the needle doesn't move, you're like, this is fine. I've always been slightly warm.
Exactly. And that's why economists keep saying real wages are up, and everyone thinks they're lying. Real wages moved a little after a long, flat stretch, but the change was too small and too uneven. The level didn't matter because nobody experiences level.
So misery mechanism 1 is just humans are derivative-based creatures, and life is a second-order differential equation with a lagged response.
Yeah, roughly. Mechanism 2, the expansion of wants. That's the classic hedonic treadmill. You get a raise, you move to a better apartment, then the better apartment becomes the baseline and you need a better car, and suddenly your 20% raise made you less satisfied because your comparison set changed.
I love that comparison set is doing a lot of work there. It sounds so neutral. What it means is your neighbor got a boat, so now your kayak feels like a log.
It's not just neighbors. It's the curated feed. You see everyone's best Saturday, their renovated kitchen, their "we finally made it" post, and your brain treats that as the reference distribution. Gelman's point is the denominator of enough expands faster than your numerator of have.
So wanting is a ratchet. Once it extends, it never retracts. It's not a cycle. It's a debt spiral of aspiration. The interest rate is your own dopamine.
That's the Thury mechanism. Entitlement resets the baseline. Once something becomes expected, it stops producing joy and starts producing rage when it's threatened. Air conditioning, streaming subscriptions, 2-day shipping, you don't wake up grateful for them. You wake up furious if they buffer.
The baseline is not 0. The baseline is last year's luxury plus a little more. So every new convenience becomes a constitutional right, and any interruption is tyranny.
Exactly. And the fourth one is the killer. Lack of future security. Even if your current level is fine, if you don't believe it's stable, job, health insurance, rent, social security, you can't enjoy it. You're just waiting for the variance to hit.
So you're not experiencing your life. You're managing a portfolio of possible bad outcomes, and the options are all unhedged.
That's the whole model. It's not that America got poorer. It's that change is slow. Wants grew, baselines reset upward,
and security collapsed. All four at once.
And a statistics professor named Gelman published this like it was a discovery. What's next? A sociologist discovering that getting punched repeatedly makes you unhappy? Somebody call Harvard.
To be fair, he's a Bayesian. He probably has a posterior distribution on despair.
I want to see the scatter plot. Y-axis, screaming into a pillow. X-axis, number of subscription services you pay for but don't use. I bet there's a quadratic relationship.
The subscription thing is a perfect example of all four. You subscribed when the price was low. Change motivated you. Then it became normal, expansion of wants. Then you got angry when Netflix added ads, entitlement reset. And now you don't cancel because you're afraid you'll miss something, lack of future security.
So my HBO Max account is a statistical mechanism of misery. I knew it.
You're also paying for Peacock because you wanted The Office that one time. That's a fixed cost of identity now.
I have no memory of subscribing to Peacock. It just appears on my credit card like a ghost. That's not a mechanism. That's a haunting.
The ghost of sunk costs future. But here's the thing. The four mechanisms don't hit equally. For lower income people, the fourth one, future security, dwarfs everything. You can't get on the treadmill if you don't know whether you can pay rent in March.
Right. The hedonic treadmill is a luxury metaphor. If the floor is lava, you don't care about the incline on the treadmill. You're just trying not to die.
And the people who experience the expansion of wants most intensely are often the ones who already have enough. They're optimizing the last 10%, while everyone else is still fighting for the first 80.
Which is why money doesn't buy happiness is advice exclusively given by people with money to people without. The correct formulation is money doesn't buy happiness after your floor stops being lava.
There's literature on this. Above around $75,000, the marginal happiness per dollar drops off. But that number is old and varies by city. In New York, the lava line is like 120.
Yes. In New York, 120 is where you stop being angry that your studio apartment has no windows. Below that, the mechanisms are just survival.
So the political implication is you can't fix misery by raising GDP alone. You need to flatten the change curve, make volatility less brutal, shore up security, and maybe stop selling unlimited wants as a lifestyle.
Good luck. The entire economy is an engine for expanding wants. That's what advertising is. That's what the algorithm is. It's a machine that manufactures misery, then sells you the temporary fix.
But that's not new. What's new is the speed. The comparison set updates in milliseconds. Your baseline gets reset by 1,000 micro-influencers a day. The mechanisms are overclocked.
So we're not just on a hedonic treadmill. We're on a hedonic peloton with a leaderboard. Everyone's rank is visible. Your neighbor's output is in your face.
And the subscription is $44 a month, which you forgot to cancel.
That's it. I'm getting off. I'm canceling everything. I'm going to live in a cave and only compare myself to the cave next door.
The cave next door has better natural light. You'll want it.
Then I'll dig a basement under the cave. And then I want the basement to have a sauna. And then the sauna will have a subscription service for premium steam.
See? You can't escape. Gelman's fourth mechanism. Even the cave is insecure if a landlord can evict you.
So the only stable state is being the landlord of the cave. And that's just the first mechanism again, because the landlord only feels good when he raises the rent. And now I'm doing class warfare math again.
Which is a fancy way of saying statistics. So we left off with class warfare math, which is stats. And here's the statistic that got me. Under our last episode, a commenter described going to a town in the Dominican Republic. Cinder block houses, no stoplights, but every evening people dragged plastic chairs into the street, someone's abuela made beans, kids played baseball with a milk jug. He flew back to his suburb.
So after all that class warfare math, I looked up the actual Gelman piece. The whole counterpunch is that French was arguing oligarchy doesn't affect your daily life. Gelman comes back with a list: billionaires corrupting government, plane crashes from deregulation, data risks from monopolies, vaccination rates collapsing, gambling legalized in every state.
Right. And the synthesis is the part that lands. Rich plus insecure plus isolated equals miserable. That's the real thesis. Wealth doesn't cancel the misery. It just makes the insecurity feel more humiliating because you have all this money and still can't fix what's wrong.
Wait, say that again? Wealth makes insecurity more humiliating?
Yeah. If you're poor and your kid is sick, the system failing you is background noise. It's the expected outcome. But if you're worth $200 million and your kid is sick, and you still can't get an appointment with the specialist because the whole medical system is a broken referral loop,
You thought the money would solve it, and it didn't.
exactly. The money was supposed to be the cheat code. That's the whole pitch of wealth. You accumulate enough and the world stops happening to you. But the world doesn't stop. It just charges you more for the same misery.
This tracks with what we know about happiness research. Once you're past basic security, the curve flattens, but the loss aversion gets sharper. You have more to protect, so threats feel bigger.
The billionaire in the bunker in New Zealand isn't sleeping better than the guy in a studio apartment. He's just awake for different reasons. The guy in the studio is worried about rent. The billionaire is worried that the bunker contractor cut corners and the concrete isn't blast-proof, and he can't complain about it at dinner because everyone at the table works for him.
Or the plane thing from Gelman. You can afford a private jet, but then you read about the Boeing quality control collapse, and you realize the private jet is maintained by the same underpaid mechanics as the commercial fleet. The wealth got you a nicer seat, not a safer flight.
Look, there's a reason every rich guy eventually goes down a rabbit hole about finding a good doctor. They all converge on this paranoid obsession with finding the one specialist who isn't captured by the insurance system. But the specialist they want doesn't take insurance. He's got a concierge practice, 2-year wait list, and charges $10,000 a pop. And you're still getting the same quality of care as the public option. It's the same antibiotic for the same sinus infection.
That's the isolation part, right? The rich guy can't just go to urgent care. He's too important. He's got a guy for that. But the guy is in the Hamptons for the summer. So he sits in his $80 million townhouse, congested, miserable, scrolling WebMD.
And the gambling thing, the legalization, that's the part where I think Gelman is underselling it. It's not just that gambling is legal now. It's that gambling is legal and it's marketed as a wealth-building strategy. You've got guys in their 20s running pump.fun meme coin casinos and thinking they're day traders.
That's a different kind of rich, insecure, isolated. You're rich on paper for like 48 hours. Then the token crashes, your group chat thinks you're a genius, and you're back at your parents' house with a paper loss you'll never recover from.
And you're isolated because the people around you don't understand what happened. Your dad thinks you played the market. Your friends think you almost made it. You're not a victim of a rigged system. You're a bag holder. The insecurity of knowing you were the exit liquidity for someone with more coins.
So it's not that oligarchy doesn't affect daily life. It's that oligarchy is the daily life now. It's the air. You can't step outside it.
Which is what French misses. He thinks of oligarchy as like a room full of men in suits smoking cigars and deciding who gets to be president, which is also a thing that happens. But the daily oligarchy is the feeling that you're always swimming in someone else's pool. The data broker knows your kid's school. The casino app knows your credit limit. The $1 trillion index fund owns your landlord. You're not a citizen. You're a user.
So when you're rich, you know you own part of the pool. But you're still in the pool. And the pool is full of sharks. And the water is getting warmer.
The oligarch's only advantage is he thinks he can call the lifeguard. But the lifeguard is a private equity firm that also owns the pool chemicals, and they've decided pool chemicals are not core to the business. So now the pool is green.
See, this is the thing. We keep coming back to this. The rich guy doesn't have an escape. He has a slightly different view of the same fire. The money gives you a window, not a door.
And that's what makes him more miserable. Because when you're broke, you can tell yourself the story, if I just had enough money, this would all be fixed. It's a fantasy, but it's a fantasy that gives you hope. The rich guy doesn't get to have that fantasy. He's already tested it, and it failed.
The blankie doesn't work.
The blankie is made of cashmere and cost $14,000, and it's still not warm.
That's darker than you usually go.
I've been reading the comments on r/true Reddit. It's not good for my mental health.
But the inshitification life cycle is trending.
Speaking of inshitification, the other part Gelman touched on was the data risk thing. The rich guy thinks he's protected because he has a guy who handles his cybersecurity. But the data broker doesn't care. They're scraping his daughter's school directory from a PTA newsletter. The guy's personal security is a full-time job, but he doesn't know he should be doing it. He thinks the money is the security, so he's more exposed.
Because he's not used to being a target. The poor guy knows to be paranoid about scams. The rich guy clicks the same phishing email because it looks like it's from his club's accountant.
And the vaccination rates thing. You'd think the rich would be the most vaccinated, but the data Gelman cites shows the highest opt-out rates in wealthy enclaves. The money gives them access to alternative medicine, which is just wellness-branded isolation. I'll protect myself with my own immune system and this broth.
The broth is just soup.
It's not even good soup. It's $40 of dehydrated vegetables that a guy in a podcast sold him.
Wealth doesn't make you secure. It makes you isolated enough to think you can buy security. Then it humiliates you when the security fails.
And the counterpunch to French is wake up. The oligarchy isn't a distant boardroom. It's the app on your phone, the price of your eggs, the reason your plane fell apart. It's the entire operating system.
And if you're lucky enough to be at the top of that system, you just get to see more clearly how broken it is. The view is better, the fall is longer.
So the real tax on wealth is that you can't unsee it.
The tax on wealth is the subscription fee to reality.
And the rich guy tried to cancel the subscription, but the terms of service say you can't.
So he's stuck in the green pool with the sharks on a private jet that's probably fine, but he can't stop thinking about it.
And that's why the Hamptons guy sits in his mansion, congested, alone, refreshing his portfolio, wondering why he still feels like he's drowning.
Because he owns the pool.
But the pool owns him back.